Hi everyone, Kendall here, and welcome to my sew-along tutorial for Block 8 of the What's in Your Closet sew-along, hosted by Pat Sloan at her website, ilovetomakequilts.com. The theme to go along with this week's block is hats. Thus, I have one on. If you haven't done so already, jump over to Pat's website, download this week's free pattern, come back here, and you guessed it, I'll show you how I do it. Start where we always start, and that is with all of our pieces cut out as per the pattern. So you should have different sizes in your light and medium fabrics and a couple of squares in your dark fabric. We're going to sit all of the smaller squares to the side because they come in final block construction. This block we need to make up a total of 16 half square triangles. So we are going to take all of our light 3-inch squares and draw a diagonal line from corner to corner on those. You should have 6. And then we need to take 2 of our medium squares and draw a diagonal line on those also, and they will create half square triangles with the dark squares. So we're going to, as I said, draw a diagonal line corner to corner on all of our light squares, match that up right sides together with 6 of our medium squares, take 2 of our medium squares and draw a diagonal line corner to corner on the back of those, match those up right sides together with the 2 dark squares, and take them all to the machine and stitch 1/4 inch on each side of our drawn line. Now that we've sewn on each side of our drawn line, I like to give these a press first just to set all those seams and set all the stitches down into our fabric before taking them to the cutting mat and slicing them in half on the drawn line. You can slice these in half with your rotary blade as I'm showing you here. Grab your ruler. The seam allowance doesn't really matter here because we've already sewn the seams, but we do try to just cut that across our drawn line. Alternatively, and depending on how you feel on the day, you can cut these in half with your scissors. And that is just as simple as cutting along that drawn line. So we'll cut all of these apart, and then we need to press all of these towards the darker of the 2 fabrics. You will notice with our dark and medium half square triangles that I press 2 towards the dark and I'm pressing the other 2 towards the medium, and that is so when we come to put these together that we will have opposing seams for sewing these together and everything will sit together nicely. So press 1 set of 2 towards the dark fabric, the other set of 2 towards your medium fabric, and we'll have lovely seams that slot together beautifully. So I've left these last 2 half square triangles because did you know that you can use your folded corner clipper tool to trim your half square triangles before you press them? You just need to know which measurement you're using and pay attention to that 1/4 inch line. And I'm going to show you how. We're going to line up that 1/4 inch line from our folded corner clipper tool on our stitching line and make sure that our measurement, in this instance is 2.5 inches, is inside the triangle. We're then just going to trim away those first 2 little bits. We then need to just rotate the piece that we're trimming over to the other side. Once again, place that 1/4 inch mark on our stitching line, and this time we can line up that 2.5 inch line on the bottom right hand corner and then we can trim those final 2 sides. We can then press this and we have a perfectly trimmed half square triangle using our folded corner clipper tool. So how about that? Now to trim the rest of these, I am going to pull in my makeshift block lock ruler, which I created by placing 3 layers of painter's tape on the diagonal of my little 3.5-inch square here. We just simply butt that edge of the painter's tape up against our seam and where we've pressed that over, and we'll trim our first 2 sides before rotating the block and the tool. And you'll see that that all came in one, and then we line up our 2.5 inches on the outside there, making sure that we are still butted up against that seam allowance, and we'll trim the final 2 sides. I'll get and do this for all the remaining half square triangles, and I'll meet you back to lay out the block. It is possible to still do my 2 at a time method when using this makeshift block lock. As you can see me doing here, I've nested up those seams nice and snug, and the edge of that painter's tape still catches on that seam. It's not as firm a catch as when you're just using a single layer, but it does work, and you can still do them 2 at a time. All that's left for us to do now that we've made all of our half square triangles is pull in those smaller squares we set aside earlier and lay this out in the grid as per the pattern. I've put the little inset in the top right hand corner there, and we just need to make sure that we get all of the angles for our half square triangles correct. You would have noticed, or you may not have noticed when I was doing some pressing, that for 2 of the half square triangles I pressed them towards the lighter fabric rather than the darker fabric, and that's so that I could get those seams to nest when I sewed them together in these rows. So we're going to construct this grid. We're then going to sew all of our squares together to create rows, and we're then going to sew those rows together, making sure, as I said, that all of your points and everything are as per the pattern. I did consider sewing this together in 4-patch units, but as you would have seen in a previous video, I got a little confused when I was doing that, so I've decided in this instance to create rows, sew those rows together. When we come to pressing for our rows, we need to press each row in the opposite direction. So we'll take our top row and press to the right, for example, and then we'll take the next row down and press everything towards the left, 3rd row to the right, 4th row to the left, etc. So that when we go to sew our rows together, we have opposing intersections and every single one of our intersections will nest. Just while you're watching me construct this part of the block, folks, here's your friendly reminder to like the video, share it with a friend, leave me a comment down below and tell me what you think, and if you haven't done so already, please subscribe to my channel and make sure you click that little bell icon so you'll be notified of all my upcoming releases. You may have noticed there, folks, that where I had those half square triangle points intersecting on my seam lines, that I opened up the seam and gave it a twist to spin them. So I'm just showing you here now what I did, and I do this where there are points of half square triangles coming together, as it distributes the bulk and gives you the flattest block possible. You simply just pull out, the few stitches that are on the opposite side of your seam allowance, and then you can spin those seams in either a clockwise or an anti-clockwise direction. To enable this on all three intersections across here where I've got my half square triangles, you would have just seen me clip into the seam allowance but not past the stitching, so that I can move the seam allowances in the direction that I want them to go to enable me to spin those intersections. And then we will just press that into place and we can move along with the rest of our horizontal row stitching. And with that, the block for this week is done using all our squares and half square triangles. But there is an alternate way that you could construct this block using what I term elongated flying geese. And you'll see here that I've done that, and on each row there is no seam line in our large red fabric. And so I just created elongated flying geese units, or just using sew and flips on the end of larger rectangles. It didn't give me a result that I was 100% happy with, which is why I showed you the method as per the pattern. Thanks for joining me again this week, folks. I just thought I'd show you at the end there the alternate way that I did make this block using elongated flying geese or just strips with sew and flips on each end. I didn't do that as a tutorial as I didn't want to confuse things, and there is a little bit of waste where you trim off those edges. Not much, but by using the half square triangles and the squares, you get no waste at all, except that little bit that you trim off your half square triangles. As always, folks, thanks for joining me again this week, and I'll see you all again real soon. Bye for now.